You are listening to the Next Play podcast, the playbook for high-performing leaders who want to exceed their full potential. From walking on the Ole Miss football team at 5'7", 150 pounds and earning a full D1 scholarship, to coaching thousands around the world and working with massive organizations like IBM. I've learned countless lessons that I'll be sharing right here with you. Join me as I interview some of the most successful people so you too can learn how to focus on always moving forward by deciding, planning, and executing on the next play relentlessly. This is Richie Contartesi with the Next Play podcast, and today we have an extremely special guest in Russ Callahan. And not only is he a special guest, but he's here live in person at our new Next Play headquarters. Actually, I don't know if I told you, we just sold a location downtown, fitness facility that I have downtown, but we're here, it's new, but this is about Russ. So Russ was named to the Biz Bash 500, 2021's most influential event professionals. He's received his CEM from IAEE in 2013. He is on the board of directors for the Southwest chapter of IAEE and the Live Event Coalition. Russ is currently Vice President of Sales and Operations for Quest Events, which is a very prestige position. So Russ, thanks for being on the show.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, man. Super excited for this conversation and to learn from you. I really am. You have a lot of experience, a lot of not just experience, but knowledge, managing people, hiring people, developing people, retaining people. So I'm super excited for this, but let's just start with, how did you get into business? And I know a big part of your life, we kind of talked a little bit about beforehand, was the FFA. So tell me a little bit about that and how that shaped you into getting into business.
Sure. Well, FFA, for those people who don't know, back in the day, it was called Future Farmers of America. Not that I was we had a family farm for like 2 years, and that's because I had enough animals. Did not come from a rural or agriculture background, but joined this organization and got excited about the leadership potential in it. Through multiple years of going from one office holder to another and one competition to another, ended up at the end of my high school career being a state officer in the state of California for FFA. 32,000 members of FFA, and the state officers there spend a year on the road, putting on leadership conferences, teaching classes in high school, meeting with business leaders of all levels, going to the national events, things of that nature. So during that, it was really life-shaping type of leadership where I was able to really connect with people, kind of understand people a little bit more. Yeah. And it changed my outlook on life and how I was going to approach it dramatically.
Yeah, those youth leadership organizations, there's like the FCCLA, the FBLA, right?
They're all fantastic. And quite frankly, it's one of those areas where, I encourage my kids to get as active as they could in it. And I encourage anybody to, if you really want your child to be active in something, even if they're active in sports and they're doing a lot of those types of things in sports where leadership is, the things that they can learn from an organization like that will change the direction of their life, because they will make connections for people that will last the rest of their lives.
Right.
And then it's a lot of like-minded people, which, it's that basic of it's not what you are and who you know, but a lot of times it's the people you hang out with. Yeah. And especially at that age. And if you're in with the right people, then you can, get places where if you're in with the wrong, you can get to the wrong places.
Very true. This is true. So has your leadership philosophy, like obviously you started developing what your leadership philosophy was, your mindset around it, how you did it. Has it changed a lot?
Dramatically.
Okay, so it's changed a lot. So let's just start how you got into business after FFA, and then
I think part of it, when the business philosophy, I have to go back to when I worked fast food at 16 years old.
Okay.
Because I've always been the type of leadership, always out front. And they made me a shift manager at that age. And quite frankly, when I left that organization, they threw a party for me, didn't invite me to it because I was a little jerk.
Yeah.
I really thought that leadership and running a business meant these things. how you get people to do what you're supposed to do, a lot of those
management,
the stereotypes of management. And so then by the time I did all of this young, and when I was 18, the end of my 18th year, I started working for a company called Warehouse Entertainment, a record chain. By the time I was 19, I was running a $6 million store for them. And so I changed my leadership, management, wow. General manager. Wow. And they're insane for letting a 19-year-old run a store of that size, but hey, I did well, so it was fun. And I was a little overconfident in my life and came off, quite frankly, cocky.
Like you didn't know, how did you phrase it?
I didn't know what I didn't know.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, and I made my fair share of mistakes through that, and learned a lot, and usually the hard way. As I've always told my kids, the best learned lessons in life are the hardest ones you have to learn, and the most painful. Yeah. And so, I caused myself my share of pain as I went up through that organization, ended up being a multi-unit manager by age 24. And then the record business went away. Yeah. It was very unfortunate because it was like one of the coolest jobs ever.
Right. What made it so cool? Just curious.
Well, by the time I ended with that organization, I was doing marketing promotions for Northern California, Oregon, and Washington. So I was backstage for every concert you could ever want to be. I coordinated the in-stores for artists. It was a whole lot of fun.
Got it. Okay. So you're traveling, you're going to concerts.
Yeah, if my kids were older, I would have been the coolest dad ever because they got to go everywhere.
Got it.
I got to have lunch with Gwen Stefani. I tell my daughter that now and she loses her mind. So, that type of environment was just a lot of fun to be a part of.
For sure.
So I started at that age, I started working with the board of directors. And when things went south, I, reorganized myself out of a job. So that was my first touch of organization and reorganizing. The nice part about being a part of a large organization like that is they believe in training.
Yeah.
And I was smart enough at that age because of my FFA history and all that other stuff to take advantage of the training and take it seriously. And so I learned a lot during that period of time of how to change. And I was willing to change. Yeah. And so that just moved from that into the next step where when I was with Warehouse, I started my own business in the AV world in San Luis Obispo, California. I did lights for Luscious Jackson, Robert Cray, different people like that, and did a whole lot of wedding DJing, which educated me a lot on how to deal with upset people as much as anything else, because brides are brides. And while they're all beautiful people, they can have a tendency to be a little bit off the deep end, especially when it comes to the biggest day of their life. Yeah. And indeed it is. Yeah. Ended up with Kinkos after that. Great organization. Again, they believed in training. Did that for a little while. Then I came to Las Vegas after that with Kinkos. And then ended up into the AV business with Encore Productions, which is now a huge company. And spent time with them, worked at the Las Vegas Convention Center for a few years. And so every time I just learned more about what to do, what not to do. When you're a manager at 18 years old and you're managing people who are 45 and 50 years old, and you're trying to, I was over my skis so often it was ridiculous. And the good part was I understood I was over my skis, but didn't necessarily help the bumps.
But that's important that because people can feel, like you were saying with that one, you can feel when someone doesn't understand that. Yeah. But if you're working with somebody and they're younger or there's an age, but they know it and they treat you a certain way knowing that you know it, with the outcome of making sure you're still reaching your potential every day, then I think that's how you can get through that. I mean, what are your thoughts on how do you?
It's depending on your age, it's a much more difficult thing to do. Right.
If there's a big age gap.
Yeah. The one, a weird sounding thing, but one thing I did is during my 20s, I had a beard the whole time because it made me look older. Because without this, and I've got a little bit of a round baby face. Obviously, that doesn't really affect much more now that I'm in my 50s, but still. But in my 20s, I had a beard the whole time to try and look older. And that confidence level never really abated to the point where it kind of held me back on occasion. Yeah. Lost a job or lost a promotion or two because I was quite told, look, you're a little too arrogant, check yourself.
Oh, wow.
And they were right, looking back on it, and having kids was probably one of the things that adjusted that approach as much as anything else. And then just, failing.
Yeah.
Failing is so important.
Yeah.
And so missed in today's day and age. Failure is the best teacher that you'll ever have because you generally don't forget the lesson.
Yeah.
And
how do you get people? So even on your team, right? Like you're in sales. So you have, how many salespeople do you have?
Well, organizationally, everybody sells.
Got it.
But there's never not someone selling.
I like that. Yeah,
but I have a small handful of salespeople right now, only about 14.
Okay.
So that concentrate on selling more.
And they're failing all the time, right?
Yes.
Like rejection, failure, hate comments and things people say is like just ridiculous. So how do you teach them? Because it's one thing to say, right?
Mhm.
Failure is inevitable. It's the only way to success. These things is just very true. How do you teach your team to be able to not just understand those concepts, but be able to execute on them?
It really comes down to living what you preach. So many times, and in every sales book you'll ever get, and everybody tells you it's a numbers game. And I didn't realize the number game nature of it until for a little bit during the downturn in 2008, I worked for American Express. And I worked on the trade show, and I was managing the group that handed people pens on the trade show floor to try and get them to sign up for cards. Pure numbers game. I mean, it's almost like selling used cars. If you talk to enough people, you're going to sell something.
Right.
And I really, at that point,
that predictable.
It was that predictable. Absolutely.
Like level of skill.
Depending on level of skill, talk to 45 people, you're going to get one. If you're not quite as good, talk to 100 people, you're going to get one. But you're going to get one if you talk to that number of people.
Right.
And so that was the first time I ever really understood what rejection and how to deal with it was.
Were you the one actually doing or managing?
I was managing and doing. So my number wasn't as high, but I still had to get out there and lead by doing and showing. And while in my past, I tried insurance sales, I tried all these other sales and various things, I never really understood the importance of being able to get out there and ask for the sale.
Yeah.
And being able to put up with the rejection and not take it personally. It's the hardest thing any salesperson does, because you invest yourself so deeply into what you're selling if you believe in what you sell.
Right.
And that rejection is the same as every other rejection in your life. It's no different than asking a girl for a date and being turned down in high school. It is a rejection and it hurts.
Right.
So how do you get past that piece? So living what you preach is essential on the operation side and on the sales side. That's fine. What are we going to do to correct that moving forward? How do we get that next piece? Did you ask for the sale? Well, if you haven't asked for the sale, let's get on the phone and ask for the sale together. Introduce me to your client. I'll teach you how to get to that point.
Yeah.
But you've really got to live what you preach. And often managers and sales directors don't do that. Right. They're much more interested in what that bottom line number is, and have you hit your number of calls this month, and how come you're not sitting in front of more people, and what are you doing to correct that? Well, a lot of times, unless you find, and I've got a couple salespeople that are just dynamos, and I have one that I just say, hey, go do this, and she will knock down any door, beat down, and she's always going to succeed because she is a prototypical salesperson. It's hard to find prototypical salespeople.
Right.
It's
and even they still have, they still get down.
They still get down. They have challenge. Yeah, absolutely. There's times where they're all caught up in one thing and it blows up in their face. It happens.
Right.
So how do you motivate them to say it's okay not to succeed?
Right.
And
how what's your philosophy around that?
Well, one, I always remind them that usually it takes 4 or 5, depending on how many interactions it is to even get a response from somebody. So keep going
just
at
constantly showing them it's just a numbers game. It's just numbers.
It's a numbers game. And I truly believe in relationship sales. I think it's Jeffrey Gitomer says, if when you come right down to it, someone will buy from someone they like, all things being equal.
100%.
All things not being equal, someone will buy from someone they like. So just because you don't have the best price, just if you're in with that person and they trust you as their source,
Right.
they're going to buy from you, and might not buy from you every time, but that piece, it's important.
Right.
So in junior high school, I was the kid who never got girls to go with me or date, but I was the same guy who all the girls in junior high school, we called on the phone, they talked to me and they told me all their problems. So I had the dirt on every single girl in junior high school. And at some point, I don't know, probably in my mid 30s, I figured out after talking to people that if I'm that guy to the people that I'm selling to, I'm going to succeed a lot more, because I've opened myself to the point of really, I'm more concerned about them than I am the sale. And quite frankly, I have lifelong friends because of it.
Right.
And the more genuine you are, the more you're interested in the person you're talking to, the more often that, the sales piece is almost a formality.
Right.
They want to use you. They believe you. They believe in what you'll do.
Right.
And then
exactly, it's the end result that you're going to get for them. Right.
Yep. And then you got to make sure that end result is exactly what you promised.
Because if you don't, then it's lights up. So if I'm in a leadership role, right, I constantly have people down. Right. It's just part of the game.
Right.
And so I love your idea of doing it too, of leading by example. I think that's really important. Do you feel that, are there any other strategies that number one, it's not about selling an item. It's about the problem that you could potentially solve for an individual. Curing
someone's pain.
Right. 100%. And then obviously fulfilling and following through. Right?
That is, and to me, that's the most important, because the most expensive marketing dollar and sales dollar is the marketing dollar and sales dollar you spent on failure. If you don't deliver for the customer, it's so expensive to get a customer. And if your operations side can't deliver, it's a complete waste of your time.
That's frustrating for it, because usually, you have marketing, sales, fulfillment, or customer success, and then you'll have retention, right? Mm-hmm. So a lot of times as a salesperson, you're relying on marketing, right? And I think the modern day of marketing and sales is much more intertwined than it ever has been
100%.
In the past, which is a good thing. They no longer hate each other. Most of the time, if it's done properly. And then on the back, but as a salesperson, you are dependent on fulfillment when you don't have control of that,
so in live events, especially, but in other pieces that I've done, you often hear the term, the salesperson sells the dream, I live the nightmare. And to break down that confrontational role between operations and sales is essential. And it's so often that sales, they're constantly going to complain about operations, and operations is constantly going to complain about sales. That's part of why I've always went with the philosophy of everybody sells, because everybody needs to have a piece, and they need to have something in the game. And they need to understand what the other person is dealing with. And so when sales is having a problem with operations, it's okay, well, let's talk to operations, find out what that problem really is and what the core reason behind it is. Because just because there's an impression that this is the problem, A is not usually the problem. It's usually B, C, or D. And you have to get to that point. And so you have to make sure your operations side is set up that they can succeed easily with what sales has to do.
Right.
And confrontation does nobody any good in that world. It's so counterproductive for sales and operations to be at each other's throats.
Yeah, I mean, it leads for a nightmare.
Yeah, and so sometimes you'll succeed and sometimes sales will do well. And then you get salespeople that if they're messing up on sales, they start to buy donuts for operations and the warehouse guys, and they try and do these things so that they can get their last minute thing done. When if they just had done their job properly to start with, that wouldn't be an issue.
Right.
And in turn, operations is scrambling, spending way too much money because they failed to do something that sales needed them to do. And now they're trying to make up for it and play catch up and trying to mollify the problem that they caused due to lack of planning.
Right. 100%. No, it makes a lot of sense. So how did you get to where you are today? How did you become the VP of the vice president of sales and operations of a company that had pre-pandemic 400 and
We had about 485 employees pre-pandemic.
it's a pretty big company.
Yeah,
So-
it's a good sized company. It's, we do a lot of revenue, and we're really the largest and the only type of company of our size doing what we do, which is an interesting. We have some competition in various areas, but nobody can approach our size, our scope of inventory, things of that nature.
Because you're not just local either.
No, we had 26 locations pre-pandemic. Post-pandemic, we'll be around 16, and then we're going to move up to 18 probably.
So you're going to
we're going to reopen a couple locations where it makes business sense.
So how did you get to where you are? I mean, that's a big role. You worked for some solid companies. You had growth.
The bizarre nature of it is everything I did in the steps along the way gave me the perfect knowledge to do what I need to now. Back when I was with Kinkos, I became a desktop publisher, and I was in charge of the tech side of a location. Granted, I lied my way into the job. There was no way I was qualified. I never should have been there.
Yeah.
But I taught myself how to do Photoshop overnight, and taught myself how to do PageMaker and all these other programs because I had some computer acumen.
Yeah.
And so I was able to get into the position and fake it till I make it. And that in turn taught me the IT side of things. I helped Kinkos roll out the backbone, their nationwide backbone for their IT infrastructure. Wow. And so it's like one thing just led to another. And then when I went into the AV world, I grabbed a piece of that, started in computers first, then moved up to the AV side.
So you really could have set this up better for us. So.
Yeah, it just kind of builds up.
Yeah. Got it.
So, it's one step led to the next. So I was director of trade shows for Encore. So that's when I started to learn how to business travel, because nobody teaches you the things you need to know when you first start business traveling. So I always try and now teach my salespeople that have never traveled before what that means, how to do it. Because you're scared to do a lot of things, and it's like, no, that's a necessity for the business. Go do it. So, it's honestly, it was one thing led to another, and I just kept striving to move up and make sense and make myself useful for the company. When I ended up with Quest, I quite frankly had the choice between a few different companies, and I'm at a point in my life where it's like, I can go for the money, and money's important to everybody, but it's not that important to me anymore. I need obviously enough to live, but I wanted to be with a company where I could make a difference, where the decisions I made and the people I'm working with make a firm difference in the direction of the company, how it can grow, and how the people react to the things that they do. And that was really, really important to me. And so I made that choice. And while, I was making considerably less money than I probably should have, that's all gone and I'm fine now.
Yeah.
It's a matter of trusting yourself to grow. So one of the things for me is I don't have the college education. So every time I started with a company, especially when I was younger, I had to start at the bottom and fight my way to the top.
Because you don't have the paper.
Because I didn't have the piece of paper.
The 4 years of doing
right. The school of hard knocks piece of paper doesn't qualify for anything.
No.
So like when I started out with Kinkos, I started out doing graveyards because I just lost my job, reorganized myself out of the job at Warehouse Entertainment, had 2 young kids, said, okay, what can I do to take care of my kids, still make a living? I'll work graveyards. So I worked graveyards at Kinkos. 3 months later, I lied my way into being the assistant manager of technology. Within a year, I was running the location. Mm-hmm. It's, if you're constantly striving to do better and constantly striving for more, you can get there. It's just a matter of dealing with the setbacks as they come up.
Right. So how do you, today, right? Like
mm-hmm.
now you're back on track of you built this team, 400 and something employees. Obviously your team was much bigger than it is now.
Right. We're about 187 right now.
Right. So fourth or almost half. Yeah. Okay. So 30%. So where do you, a lot of people are struggling right now to attract talent, top talent, and then of course bring them on and hire them.
Yeah.
What's been your strategy to go from as high as you were in hiring them to losing a ton What was the lowest you were at?
We went down to 45 at one point.
It's back to 180. How have you done? You know, so many people are struggling right now to do that. How did you do that?
Well, I can't say it wasn't a struggle or isn't a struggle still.
Yeah.
You know, I've got a couple positions I'm looking for, and the traditional channels have stopped, and I've got to find a different way to get there.
Like what
Well, for me, a traditional channel is first, honestly, I want a recommendation from somebody I already work with and knows what we do. You know, we're a very unsexy business. It's you know, when I was in the AV world, it's a pretty sexy business, and you know, all this electronics and all this stuff and really cool things. And you know, when I was with the production resource group, we did the Super Bowl halftime show. You know, that's real easy to sell somebody on. Hey, look at this types of stuff we're doing. Well, now I'm in an organization where we supply those suppliers.
Right.
And so when you supply suppliers and it's drape and hardware and heavy stuff, it's really just not
like the stage. Is it the
Yeah,
stage or is it more the drape?
in some cases, it's the stage. It's definitely the pipes and the drapes, and then it's background scenery and some furniture. So it's
Is the new thing now like that LCD screen, right?
yeah, LED. Well, if you're doing a big stage background, you're actually in the LED world,
Yeah.
and yeah, that's a huge thing, but that's not cheap.
Yeah.
So we're a good middle ground alternative between pipe and drape and having all LED. You know, because there's it's pipe and drape, a few $100, few $1,000, depending on how much you need. LED, 80,000, depending on the size you need. So yeah, it really depends on what you're doing. And some of the events that we used to do were just extraordinary in size.
Wow.
So yeah, it can be a big difference. And sometimes hard sets become much more affordable.
For sure.
So
it looks cool. Like I did an event one time in Kuwait and they had the whole LCD and I was like,
oh yeah,
this is freaking
yeah, it's amazing. We the largest one we did at the time when I was there was actually the background for U2. It was
it had been insane.
It was the Joshua Tree reboot, and it was absolutely insane. Look at it on the web. It's absolutely phenomenal technology, and things had to be made in order to make that happen. So that's a real sexy place and a real easy place to get people to come to.
Yeah.
But we utilize a lot of the people who already know what we do and get recommendations from them. Hey, got a friend who wants to do what you're doing. And so, a lot of that
through
it's through the people. It's referrals and references are usually the best place for us. Some of it's other people in the industry who know the reputation of the company and aren't necessarily wanting to do some of the things they've done in the past, whether they had to travel a bunch or whether things got a little bit too goofy in the organization they were in. There's a lot of AV companies due to the pandemic that are actually just closing their doors right now. So that's been an opening for talent for us as well. But now that we've kind of exhausted that pool, we're having to dig into some of the traditional places. And the one thing that I find myself doing is being very, very honest with the person I'm bringing on, because I don't want to train somebody again 3 months from now. So it's a really odd position to be in where you're interviewing somebody and you're trying to scare them off.
Yeah.
So it's okay, this is what we do. And as I said before, it's not very sexy. We as a company make our money off people being lazy. We're the easy button, so to speak, because people just, even if they own the product, they don't necessarily want to do the work.
Right.
We've got the right product, we've got the right tools, we've got the right people, so we can do it much faster, much easier. It just flows.
Right.
So getting someone to understand what that means, especially if they don't have events background, is a little bit difficult. And so there's a little bit of trying to make sure the person in front of you really wants to do what you want them to do. So, and I don't think a lot of people are honest with their interviewees about their company, the good and the bad.
Yeah, that's a good one. They're definitely not as honest as they could be.
Yeah, you're taught as an interviewer, back when I was taught the interview lessons, is let them talk 80%, and then you need to use your 20% of the time to sell them on your company. Tell them about your 401k, tell them about your benefits, tell them how great of an organization it is, all these other things, which is fantastic. And I still do that, but I also make sure that they understand this is what the work is, and it's not always fun.
Yeah. Now, is this on the operations side, or is this how you do it on the sales side too?
Both. The sales side's a little bit different because you do want to make sure they understand the benefits of what we're doing, but they need to know that, even as a salesperson, if they're going on site, they're we did a bunch of drape for the Super Bowl recently.
For the
one in SoFi
SoFi?
Stadium. I've sold them
What
drape,
dra-
and
wouldn't they have like a long car?
so there was a piece in them when they were going out of the locker rooms, and there was a black drape and there were some lights pushed inside of that
I
drape.
think I know what you're
It
talking
looked
about.
really, really cool. Okay, so we did that, and we did some other drape and stuff for them.
Oh, that's
but-
cool. Did you get free tickets?
No, we don't. We do that, but we're not there on Super Bowl day. We're not even there the day before. We don't run into anybody who's famous.
You just get them the
We
drapes.
just get them the drapes. And so it's really important that the salespeople understand that, this is our role, this is our niche, and this is how we can fulfill things successfully.
Yeah.
And not give them an expectation that they're going to get to meet, the Super Bowl quarterbacks or something like that because of their location and things like that. And it's just, it's a reality of, what the business really is.
So the big thing that you do is you do a really good job of setting expectations.
Correct.
Got it. So the good and the bad expectations.
And I don't try and de-emphasize the bad.
Yeah.
Because I don't want somebody coming at me going, "Oh, you didn't tell me about this part of this gig. I'm
Yeah.
not sure I'm ready for this."
It's
No.
not fair. It's
Yeah,
not fair to
I
them.
told you about all the parts of the gig,
Yeah.
and you said yes, so let's keep going. And if they're at that point, okay, well, how do we get you past that piece?
Right. So what's your process for developing your people? Do you have like a philosophy or a process you use? How do you keep people to constantly be moving forward and
So-
growing? And
On both sides of the organization, it's individual. Everybody is so different, and what works for one person doesn't work for the other.
Mm.
And I tried the cookie cutter approach years ago.
What would be
And-
like an example of a cookie cutter?
Grab a book and hand it to them and say, "This is how we sell."
Jesus.
Or that there's so much of that. It's like, okay, let's go through this book together. I will trade you how to sell, and this is how we sell. We document it this way. We do this step. You're going to call. You're going to say these things. We're going to script you out. All that other stuff. And there are plenty of people out there that are cookie cutter approaching their sales. And you can see the organizations, or you've probably dealt with some of the organizations on occasion. And in turn, when a person's struggling, they're like, well, this is what's supposed to work, so you need to fit that.
Yeah.
Well, that really doesn't work. It's okay, here's how we sell, but why doesn't this work for you? And maybe something else does work for you.
Yeah.
Because I found out early on, certain things just didn't work for me as a salesperson.
Yeah. There's 100 ways to do it.
Right.
There's no, this is the only right way.
So I have the same philosophy in sales as I do in operations.
Yeah.
If plan A doesn't work, there's 26 letters in the alphabet. Find a plan.
Yeah.
And what's the next one? And part of that is really living the philosophy that change is okay.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't work, so what? Let's go on to the next piece. What did we learn from what didn't work from that? Let's go on to the next piece. So I get a phone.
Next play, not next piece.
Next play is a perfect, but honestly, it's a perfect example.
Yeah.
Because I had a phone call yesterday. A guy called me up and said, "Hey, I'd really like to do this, this, and this." Okay. Well, you're okay. Yeah. And if it doesn't work, next.
Right. 100%.
The old adage, someone, so what next, isn't just for sales and trying to get somebody to buy something. It's how you look at the whole process.
Yeah.
And sometimes it will work and sometimes it won't.
Right. And you find that now is there some sort of consistency you have with each person on your team? Because like I'm sure you have management under you, because I mean there's no way you're managing 187 people,
No,
right?
there's structures of management, but one of the things that we try and do, and I personally try and make sure in an organization, if I've got the ability to make those changes, and in this one I do, I try and keep an organization as flat as possible. A big pyramid doesn't help anybody at the bottom of that pyramid.
Mhm.
And so the flatter the organization is, the easier it is to bolt on new pieces, and the more control the people in the front of the organization have. The more you can encourage them to make decisions.
Mm.
And as long as you live the philosophy of, if you made the wrong decision, that's okay.
Yeah.
If you made the best decision you could during the time frame and you feel it was the best decision you could for the customer, I'm going to support you 100%. And afterwards, we're going to look at it and discuss why it didn't work. And not enough organizations are willing to do that.
Right.
You know, if something blows up, they want their pound of flesh.
Mm.
And I've been parts of organizations where the motto of the organization is CYA. And that doesn't do anyone any good.
What's CYA?
Cover your ass.
Oh,
So,
there you go.
and so a lot of those organizations, people will, you know, build themselves into it, and then they make sure they have 10 emails of other people that have approved what they're doing, because those 10 emails will stop them from getting yelled at, they hope.
I see.
Where I would much rather have the front of the organization be more nimble and know where it is we want to be.
Yeah.
Everybody's in the boat, everybody's rowing in the same direction, and on occasion, somebody's going to miss paddle. They're going to drop an oar. That's
Right.
fine. Pick up the oar, let's go again.
Yeah.
You know, so it really is empowering those people and living the philosophy that you say in your day-to-day operations. Because the worst thing in the world is when you have an organization where when you call somebody and say, hey, I heard this went wrong, and instantly they become defensive and afraid.
Exactly.
Because they can't learn from that opportunity.
Right.
So if they're comfortable enough that something went wrong and they can talk about it, and in turn, you don't start yelling, you don't start threatening, you don't start doing all those things that many managers do. I've had plenty of them in my lifetime go down that road.
Right.
You know, if you live the philosophy that you're talking, it will reap benefits, because everybody feels like they actually have a say in the organization, and they truly do.
Right.
You know, I've been part of those organizations where, you know, every manager I've ever had in my life, I've learned something from, whether it's what I want to do or what I don't want to do.
Yeah.
And some of them really taught me what I don't want to do. You know, it's like I think that was their mission in life, to convince me that, you know, this is not how you want to manage people, and here's proof.
Right.
So, you know, it really is living what you want. What is it you want out of the organization to do? And how often do you put every level of the organization into the decision-making skills?
Yeah.
Are you doing SWOT analysis with your group?
How
Train.
often do you do them?
I try to do
And do you
those.
do them individually or by team?
It depends. With my salespeople, I generally do it individually.
Yeah.
And
Do you have
then
like any type of process you have around with your salespeople, where you do maybe, you know, weekly this or a monthly that or a quarterly?
I try to
what
have
you found?
at least weekly touch bases with them. Sometimes we'll do weekly meetings for a while, but one problem I have with weekly meetings is you get everything you need to talk about out, and then you get this process of, oh, so what's going on in your world? And so you're sitting there on Zoom listening to people talk about what it is they're trying to do. And so you're wasting everybody's time in the group.
Oh, in a group setting.
Right.
You mean.
So the one-on-one, you know, I'll do that quite often.
Yeah.
And that's usually the most productive. I try not to. There's a meme that goes around all the time. I survived another meeting that should have been an email.
Yeah.
I try to make sure I don't have those meetings.
Yeah. No.
So, and we work very hard not to have those meetings.
100%.
So I end up, you know, if I have a weekly meeting set, but I've got nothing going on that week, I'm canceling the meeting. I just don't want to waste anybody's time, because mine's as valuable as theirs is. And let's go down. We've all got something else better to do.
Got it. Okay, cool. So the one-on-ones, what's your approach to kind of keeping them in the game? Productivity,
You know, quite
growth?
frankly, I start out with, so what's going on and what's your challenges? What can I help you with?
Yeah, I like that.
And they're always going to come up with, well, you know, hey, I ran into this, or I'm not sure about that, and I'm having this client that I'm not sure where I can get into. And my view in sales and operations is, how can I help? I can facilitate almost anything as long as you're honest with me and tell me what's going on. And that's how we move forward. But yeah, I want to help. That's, if I'm not there trying to help other people, why am I in the business? There's plenty of people pushing pencils and counting ducats and whatever else, that let them do their jobs. For me, I'm there to make the organization operate better. On the operations side, as well as the sales side, I really try and live on the 95% rule. 95% of what we do should be rote, SOP. If people know how they're supposed to react to these different things, they know they're supposed to do this, 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 and this. It's written down. It's easy for them to find. I manage in the 5%. And hopefully in the night, and if I can get it to 98 to 2%, I'm managing the 2%. because that's where the changes can happen. That's
Right.
where you can affect the organization in a positive way.
Mm.
Because if I'm spending all my time on something that should be in the 95%, I'm wasting my time
Right.
and wasting the organization's money.
Right. Fair enough. Do you have a strategy on, okay, so you have your bottom half of people who aren't performing, whether it's on operations or sales,
Right.
would you spend, so I'm thinking in terms of retention, right?
Mhm.
So do you spend more time on growing them, or do you kind of have a process where it's like, okay, you're in the bottom 30% for this amount of time. I've worked with you for this amount of time. It's time to go our separate ways,
So-
or how do you go about?
I do the basic
do I put my
ABC
time?
chart, my A players, my B players, my C players. Anybody who's an A player, I want to keep them as an A player. Anybody who's a B player, I want to figure out how I can get them to an A. Anybody who's a C player, if you can't get to a B and I'll help you get to a B, then you need to see yourself somewhere else.
Yeah.
So it really is about improving them. So whether it's one-on-one, working with them on various things, or I have a habit of getting people books that have affected me that I know have an impact. And I try and do that based on what I see them struggling with.
Yeah.
One that is constant is time management. So everybody has problems with time management. There's a couple books out there I like a lot that help people through the world of time management, and some of which were extremely impactful to me.
Yeah.
So I'll buy them a book. Here you go, read this. I had one guy recently, I handed him the book, read this 6 months ago. And yesterday or day before, I asked him, hey, how's that book going? He said, I haven't had time to read it. It's on time management. Read the book. Okay. So when I get into that category, that person might see themselves to another place.
Right.
It's.
Do you have a period at which you're like, okay, this is the line. This is the.
Honestly, it really depends on need of the organization.
Yeah.
Even though someone needs to be somewhere else, if it's debilitating to the organization based on the other things going on, I will put up with a subpar player for a while.
Yeah.
It's like in baseball. If you got a guy who can barely hit, but he's a decent fielder, you can put him at second base and you can hide him there a little bit
Right.
until the other team figures out that second base is where you're going after.
Yeah.
So it's that same type of philosophy. Is I can put somebody where they're going to do a least amount of damage possible and they're a sub player. I'll continue to try and make them better, but I'll keep a close eye on them until the other positions around, I've got no more fires to fight. Then I'll go after that one piece, because I hate to have a lasting person who's underperforming.
Yeah.
I either want them to want to improve themselves, but if they can't figure it out, and no matter how many times I work with them, then I got to promote them to a new career.
Right.
And that's
at that point, it's
it's just what you have to do sometimes, and it's never a fun part of the job.
right.
Yeah,
But it has to happen.
right, it has to happen, and I've always lived with a philosophy. I've never fired anybody who hasn't fired themselves.
Right.
Nothing should ever be a surprise to somebody who's getting written up or let go.
And because you're doing what you said, which is really powerful and important, is when you sit down with somebody, it's what can I do to help you?
Yeah.
How do I help you succeed? So real quick, and just the last two questions I have, the Biz Bash 500. That's a 2021 most influential event professional. That's a big deal. What is that? How did you get that?
So working with Biz Bash, who's an organization that's really grown a lot in the past few years. Back in the day, Biz Bash kind of felt like a nationwide chamber of commerce. Now they have new leadership, and they've really grown into a pretty influential organization in the event space. I've been working with them off and on for a few years, and we, with just working with them and being a part of the industry, they've looked at where I am and the people that I talk to and the people that I know, and they awarded me with that last year. And quite frankly, I was very honored to be a part of that group. It's nice to be at the part in your career where you're starting to get a little bit of recognition for what you've learned. And I think that's part of that.
Yeah.
So it's a good organization that really is understanding where associations and where meeting planners are going. And they're trying to, especially the mid-level meeting, is really finding a sweet spot with Biz Bash.
Got it. Cool, man. Was that like when you earned it was like a big thing, or was it?
like any of those lists, you always worry about those lists. At least I always do. You remember getting in high school, getting your who's who and, American.
Oh,
high school.
yeah.
You always worry about, okay, what is this list really about? But the people that I'm on that list with, I have a great deal of respect for. It was an honor to be on it. It really is.
Cool. And what's Russ's next play? What's your next? I mean, obviously you've had a tremendous career. You're still got plenty to go in the tank. I see you have a website as your email. Like what's your next play? I see that there's some influence coming on here.
Yeah, I've been working on rebuilding the actual website. I learned a long time ago, I had a marketing guy say, if you don't own your own name in the web, you should. And so when I saw that, I bought it. And quite frankly, I was sick of Google knowing everything that I do. So, it's kind of nice having your own email server. But I have been working to build that site a little bit. And, for me, I want to continue with Quest because I really do love the organization. And we're going to be on a heavy growth pattern in the next couple of years.
Yeah, it's about to be insane.
Both in what we currently do and then the next steps for the organization as far as how do we expand. And so that's really exciting. There's a lot of things that are getting ready to happen that I'm really excited about and are going to be a lot of fun. In the meantime,
outside of drapes
and outside of other things, not necessarily able to chat about them right now, but
fair enough.
We have some irons in the fire and really excited about it.
I bet, because the world's hybrid now.
Absolutely. And so there's plenty of space for the traditional business that we've had, but there's plenty of places we can grow to and do some things that aren't necessarily currently in our wheelhouse.
Do you feel like the event space will be back and bigger, the live event space specifically?
100%. I'm a huge
even
believer even with the hybrid. So one of the things, the difference between live events and hybrid, if you do hybrid right. And the problem right now is we have a lot of experience. Everybody has a ton of experience with doing hybrid wrong. I can't tell you the number of trade shows that said, oh, we're going to be hybrid. And we have these digital trade shows and we have, and so
they're cheesy where you can walk, you're like a sim character.
A sim character walking through, and when you get in there, all you see is their PowerPoint and videos, and nobody wants that.
Yeah, it's super cheesy.
And then we're in this meeting and here's the keynote and we're just turning a camera on and you get to sit here and watch what everybody else is watching.
Right.
That's not hybrid. If people are going to do hybrid, they're going to figure out how to do it right.
Yeah. So
and
what is right hybrid?
Right hybrid is it has to have its own planning, its own budget. You can't just expect the live interaction to satisfy the person sitting in front of Zoom because life happens. And unless you can engage them at a level that they're willing to not let life happen to them, you're going to lose them.
How do you do that during a keynote, for example?
Well, there's a lot of interactive pieces that you can add into it. For keynotes, polling has become a part of keynotes.
For sure.
And so adding people into the interaction. So good speakers and great speakers, there's usually a difference between the two. Great speakers grab their audience and make them a part of their speech. Mm-hmm. And they make them buy in. And buy-in's a little different online than buy-in is because the emotion doesn't come across the Zoom. Yep. And so those great speakers are able to make that little bit of a leap. But the other part of the hybrid and what makes people excited about watching that keynote, because most of the time on these hybrid events, people will watch the keynote and then you lose them. Right. Or the hybrids have worked really, really effectively if someone needs to deal with continuing education. Because now they're doing their CE, they're at home, they're popping through, they're, okay, I'm done. I've checked my boxes, have a nice day. So you have to do things to engage that audience. Yeah. One of them that I've seen was a fast food organization. And what they did is they had basically a TV show going on that engaged the people at home along with the actual show going on. So they had some different content to excite the people on streaming. Oh, wow. And then they engaged the live pieces as appropriate. And so, and whenever the live pieces were going on, there was engagement from the people who were watching. whether it was a raffle giveaway or answering their questions live.
So they have like their own commentators.
Right, they have their own commentators bringing them in.
That's interesting.
You know, so it's kind of like sports, because if you've ever watched a football game without commentators, unless you're really into football, it's kind of like, okay,
well, we had the Mannings.
this is running slow. Now the Mannings are engaging people in a different way, and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So in some ways,
like that?
I loved it.
The Manning cast.
The nice part, so the NFL is looking at doing 2 shows on Monday nights, so maybe they'll be able to bounce between. So if you have a really bad game, you know, they can bounce between them a little bit.
Yeah.
So I thought the Manning cast was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But doing those types of things to make it much more than just that plain 2D experience.
Right. And actually pulling people in,
making them active, making them a piece of what's going on. And so the organizations that make sure that they have a engaging live as far as the hybrid and engaging digital, and they work those two, it's separate producers, it's separate productions, it's separate ideas. Because what works for the group people that are online digitally isn't going to work and feel comfortable for the people in the live event, and vice versa.
Yeah.
So it really is understanding that. But the companies that get it are going to be able to touch so many more of their employees in a positive way, because budgets are budgets. And so if you used to have 5,000 of your employees at an event, and you filled a small arena and you put this all forward, and instead you bring 2,500 of those people. And so you've got every one of your managers and district managers and maybe a couple of special performers and the like. But now I've got this engaging piece where I can get down to the frontline worker and involve them in the message that we need to have everybody know, because so much money is wasted on getting the message to those 2,500 or 5,000 people. And when they go back to their locations, that message isn't delivered.
Right.
Or it's delivered in a haphazard way.
The front line's not getting it.
The front line's not getting it. And the front line needs to know that as much as anybody else in the organization. So if you can find a way to involve them, you're getting such bang for your buck.
Yeah.
And you're spending the same amount of money, just doing it differently.
Your hybrid is almost for the front line. Right.
It's for the front line, or it's for a couple steps lower than those exclusive players that you've been able to really bring up and bring out and spend that money on, because there's nothing cheap about live face-to-face.
No.
You know, you go into a hotel with 5,000 people and you're doing F&B. I mean, food and beverage is a huge portion of any of these meetings.
All right.
And then on top of that, you do entertainment and then speaker fees and all these other things. So if you can take just a portion of that and really get it to the rest of your organization in an effective way, that's an amazing what you'll be able to do. And then some of those companies are actually increasing their budgets now because they've seen how effective it can be.
Right. Awesome. I love it. Super excited about what is to come here 2022 on.
So am I. So a lot of things that we're doing in this live space. I'm national treasurer for the Live Event Coalition. You know, the political side of this and how to support live events is a big portion of this, advocacy and all of those things. And so that is another portion that the live events business has never really understood.
Yeah.
And so COVID gave us an opportunity to get a really quick education.
Yeah.
And education by fire, quite honestly.
Right. Yeah.
And so it's really a matter of building that.
Right. And pushed it to where it's going now.
Yeah. So the industry is finally considering itself an industry.
Yeah.
Which live events, quite honestly, hasn't before.
Yeah.
So
but it is now.
It's important.
And entrepreneurs, big businesses, small businesses, so many people are having live events. Whether it's a smaller mastermind or it's live events that we ran, or you can have 30 people events, 5,000, 10,000, or
100,000.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So
and they all matter.
Right.
And they all are approached in a different way, and experts need to be able to be a part of it and grow it and understand it and make it and execute it.
So Russ, where can people find you? Like, I'm sure there's people that have events on here because they're obviously, I've worked with a lot of them, or potentially have in the past or could in the future. So they have events. How do they find you? How do they connect with you and your organization?
Questevents.com, easiest place to go. We're all over social as well. It's a fun, very nimble organization. So we do that. And then, as I said, I'm working on my own site, russcallahan.com, because eventually I'll need to have a retirement program, and that probably consists of either consulting or calling shows internationally, because I like to travel. So
Nice. Very cool. When you say calling, you like the announcing, like
not necessarily the announcing as much as the guy who stage manages and makes things happen.
got it.
It's a profession unto itself, and it's interesting and fun.
When you would consult, are you going to just help like meeting planners or event planners put on the?
I've done that type of consulting before. I've also done a little bit of organizational consulting, how to rearrange an organization to make it a little more flexible.
So even just like the internal, what you're doing, not just like what you're doing with your clients, but actually in
absolutely
your
both.
organization.
Yeah,
love it. Cool. Russ Callahan, thank you so much for being here. And
thanks for having me. It's been fun.
If you want to connect with Russ, russcallahan.com or Quest Events. Do you have a social media handle or anything like that you want to?
Honestly, the main social media for
LinkedIn.
me is LinkedIn. It's by far become the most effective and the least painful to read. So
connect with Russ on LinkedIn. We're connected. It's Russ and then Callahan, Callahan.
Yep.
And you'll see CEM there. So he's awesome. He's got a great background. I love the picture in the background, actually. So good stuff. Thank you so much for being on the show, man.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Really, really honored to have you. And I hope that, and I not hope, but I know that a lot of people got a lot out of this. So thank you.
I hope so. So thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Next Play podcast. If you liked the show, make sure to leave us a review. For more resources, visit relentlessuniversity.com or download the free Relentless University app. And if you're interested in having me speak at your next event, visit relentlessrichie.com. Until next time.